Across the Islamic world, from the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Khorasan, from the streets of Tehran to the villages of Yemen, 1.8 billion hearts share a single hope, a single expectation that has endured for over a millennium. They wait for the guided one. They wait for Al-Mahdi. Before we begin, if you find this video insightful, please hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who are searching for answers. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep dives into history, theology, and the questions that shape our world. Now, let's get started. The concept of a messianic figure, a divinely appointed leader who will emerge in humanity's darkest hour, is not unique to Islam. It is perhaps one of the most universal themes woven through the tapestry of human religious consciousness. The word Mahdi itself means the guided one, a leader who will guide humanity from oppression to justice, from darkness to light. But this belief didn't begin with Islam. Long before the Prophet Muhammad walked the Arabian sands, this pattern existed. When corruption consumed the earth in the time of Noah, peace be upon him, when idol worship and injustice filled every corner, the righteous prayed, "O Allah, send us someone who will give humanity a new direction." And Allah answered. Noah came with his message, warning his people for 950 years. When they refused to listen, the great flood came, and Noah and his followers began anew. Centuries later, the cycle repeated. Abraham emerged to challenge idol worship and proclaim pure monotheism. His story was prophesied in the ancient texts, a friend of God who would break the idols and establish the truth. Then came Moses. The children of Israel, enslaved in Egypt under Pharaoh's brutal tyranny, cried out for deliverance. For years they prayed for a liberator. And when the time was right, Moses was sent, not with an army, but with a staff and divine authority, to free his people and lead them to the promised land. After Moses came Jesus, the Messiah. The children of Israel awaited a deliverer who would restore their glory. Their ancient books spoke of his coming. And even today, these prophecies remain in the Bible. Then, in 7th century Arabia, when darkness again covered the earth, the Jewish scholars knew, from their own scriptures, that a final prophet was coming. They waited for him with the same anticipation that Muslims today await the Mahdi. This messianic expectation was already embedded in the Abrahamic tradition long before Islam. This is why when we study the concept of the Mahdi, we must understand this is not a belief invented in a political vacuum. It is part of a divine pattern, the pattern of Allah sending guidance when humanity needs it most. One of Islam's greatest modern poet-philosophers, Allama Iqbal of Pakistan, raised a powerful objection. In his 1905 poem, he wrote, "Witness the manifestation of the glory of thy Lord in the lofty state of your heart. Abandon all hope of the advent of the Mahdi and Jesus." His concern was profound and deserves serious consideration. Iqbal believed that the concept of a coming Mahdi was influenced by Zoroastrian Magian ideas that had infiltrated Islamic thought. He feared that Muslims, oppressed under colonial rule and corrupt caliphates, had adopted a dangerous passivity, waiting for a savior instead of taking action themselves. To Iqbal, this was spiritual paralysis. He praised Ibn Khaldun for supposedly refuting the Mahdi traditions, believing this would restore Muslims' confidence in their own agency, rather than waiting for divine intervention. Then there was Ibn Khaldun, the 14th century historian and father of sociology, whose Muqaddimah remains one of the most important works in Islamic scholarship. In his Muqaddimah, Ibn Khaldun examined 21 different hadith narrations about the Mahdi and cast doubt on their chains of transmission, arguing that most could not meet the strictest standards of authenticity. But here's where the scholarly response becomes fascinating. Islamic scholars like Maulana Ashraf Ali Thanwi wrote detailed refutations, pointing out that Ibn Khaldun, brilliant as he was in history and sociology, was not actually an authority in hadith sciences. They noted that Ibn Khaldun himself acknowledged these traditions came from major compilations, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawud, Ibn Majah, and others, yet still dismissed them. More tellingly, scholars pointed out a contradiction. Ibn Khaldun quoted traditions from 21 different companions of the Prophet, from multiple independent chains of narration, yet called these traditions rare. The reality is this. While the Mahdi is not mentioned in the Quran and is notably absent from the two most revered Sunni hadith collections, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, traditions about the Mahdi appear in numerous other authentic compilations. Many scholars argue these narrations reach the level of tawatur, meaning so many independent chains of transmission that it becomes impossible they were all fabricated. The belief exists across both Sunni and Shia Islam, though with significant differences in interpretation. What makes the Mahdi concept even more intriguing is its resonance across world religions. In Zoroastrianism, there is the Saoshyant, a figure who will appear in the final times to renew the world and defeat evil. In Hinduism, believers await Kalki Avatar, who will arrive at the end of Kali Yuga, riding a white horse, wielding a sword, establishing righteousness across the earth. In Buddhism, the Maitreya Buddha is prophesied to appear when true Dharma has been forgotten, to teach the path and restore spiritual truth. In Judaism, the awaited Messiah will restore the kingdom of David and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. In Christianity, believers await the second coming, the Parousia, when Christ will return to establish God's kingdom and judge the living and the dead. This pattern, this universal human hope for divine intervention in history's darkest hour, transcends culture, geography, and time. It suggests something fundamental about the human spirit. We know deep within that injustice cannot be the final word, that righteousness must ultimately triumph. Within Islam, the belief in the Mahdi takes different forms. In Sunni tradition, the Mahdi will be a wise and just ruler born from the lineage of Prophet Muhammad through his daughter Fatima. His name will be Muhammad ibn Abdullah, matching the Prophet's name. He will emerge after a period of great turmoil, establish justice throughout the world, eradicate tyranny, lead a world revolution, and establish a new world order based on Islamic principles. In many Sunni traditions, his appearance will coincide with the return of Jesus, Isa, who will descend to pray behind the Mahdi, symbolizing the unity of the Abrahamic traditions and the supremacy of Islamic guidance. However, in Sunni Islam, the Mahdi doctrine is not considered as theologically central and remains more of a popular belief rather than a fundamental article of faith. For Twelver Shia Muslims, the largest Shia sect, the belief is more specific and more central to their faith. They believe that Muhammad al-Mahdi is the 12th and final Imam, born in 869 CE. At the age of 5, he was hidden by Allah and has been in occultation, in hiding, ever since. Twelver Shias believe this Imam has been alive for over a millennium and will reveal himself at the appointed time to fill the earth with justice, as it has been filled with oppression. This belief in the hidden Imam shapes Shia political theology and explains much of the messianic expectation in countries like Iran. According to Islamic eschatological traditions, the Mahdi's appearance will be preceded by specific signs, conditions so severe that the earth cries out for deliverance. The foundational hadith states, "The Mahdi will not come until the earth is filled with oppression and injustice." Look at our world today through this lens. In Palestine, occupation and displacement continue, with millions living under military control. In Syria, a brutal civil war has devastated the nation for over a decade. In Yemen, one of history's worst humanitarian crises unfolds, with millions facing famine. In Kashmir, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, conflict, injustice, and suffering mark the landscape. According to tradition, before the Mahdi appears, nations will call upon one another to destroy Islam by any means necessary. The Prophet is reported to have said, "You will see nations inviting each other to attack you, like diners gathering around a feast." Other signs include the loss of knowledge and the prevalence of religious ignorance, authority placed in the hands of those who do not deserve it, the rejection of hadith, widespread moral corruption, and a time when a person will wake as a believer and sleep as a hypocrite. Interest-based economics, riba, has become the foundation of the global financial system. The traditions speak of a time when voices will be raised in mosques not for prayer, but for worldly matters. When stinginess becomes widespread, and when people treat others with respect only out of fear of the harm they might do. According to the traditions compiled by scholars across centuries, this is how it will unfold. The Prophet is reported to have said that a ruler of Arabia will die, and there will be conflict over succession. Then, at the Kaaba in Mecca, a man will appear. People will recognize something in him, a quality of guidance, of righteousness. They will urge him to accept their pledge of allegiance. Reluctantly, he will accept. With him will be 313 companions, the same number as fought at the Battle of Badr, Islam's first and most pivotal battle. These 313 will come from different corners of the earth, drawn by something they cannot fully explain. They will be scholars, commanders, thinkers, people of exceptional knowledge and character. One of them will possess the knowledge of 40 men. They will be unknown to the world, but honored in the sight of Allah. These will be his core, his inner circle, from which the movement will grow. The Prophet said, "Black banners will come from Khorasan to support the Mahdi. Nothing will stop them until they plant their flags in Jerusalem." Khorasan, the ancient region that included parts of modern Iran, Afghanistan, and Central Asia. Interestingly, within modern Iran, there is still a province called Khorasan, and Iran's revolutionary ideology has explicitly incorporated the symbolism of black banners. Whether this is merely symbolism or prophetic fulfillment remains to be seen. But the tradition speaks of armies from the east supporting the Mahdi when he appears. But the path will not be smooth. Opposition will come swiftly and powerfully. Islamic tradition speaks of a figure called the Sufyani, a deceptive leader who will oppose the Mahdi. According to Imam Ali, the Sufyani will emerge from Syria. He will have a reddish complexion, light hair, and a mark on his face. He will destroy mosques and kill those who follow the Prophet's family. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq said the Sufyani will appear in the same year as the Mahdi, and before his emergence, there will be a civil war in Syria. The parallels to the Syrian civil war that began in 2011 have not gone unnoticed by those who study these prophecies. The Sufyani will gather armies, supported by powerful nations, to crush this emerging movement that threatens the existing world order. But then, according to tradition, when the Sufyani's army marches against the Mahdi, something extraordinary will happen. In a place called Baida in the desert, the earth will swallow the army whole. This miracle, this clear divine intervention, will cause many who doubted to believe. Even some Jews and Christians will recognize the truth and join the Mahdi's cause. But the global powers will not relent. The Prophet spoke of a treaty between Muslims and the Romans, interpreted by many scholars as the Christian nations of the West. Together, they will fight a common enemy. Together, they will achieve victory. But then, in the moment of triumph, betrayal. A Christian will raise a cross, claiming victory for Christianity. Muslims will destroy the cross, declaring this was Allah's victory, not theirs. The treaty will be broken. What follows will be catastrophic. Western nations will marshal their full military might. Advanced weaponry, artificial intelligence, drones, fighter jets, missiles, an overwhelming force. The Prophet warned that when Muslims see this army, many will flee in terror, and Allah will never forgive them. Others will fight and be martyred, the best martyrs of that age. And a third group will fight and achieve victory, and Allah will never test them again. This battle will take place near Syria or in southern Turkey, regions that have already seen so much conflict in recent years. After this victory, the Muslim forces will march toward Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. The Prophet said, centuries before it first occurred, "You will conquer Constantinople. How blessed will be the leader who conquers it, and how blessed will be his army." In 1453, Ottoman Sultan Mehmed the Conqueror fulfilled this prophecy, transforming Constantinople into the Islamic jewel of Istanbul. But some scholars argue the prophecy has a dual fulfillment, that the Mahdi will reclaim it in the end times. According to tradition, the conquest will happen without battle. The Muslim army will approach, raising voices in Allahu Akbar, and the city will surrender peacefully. But even as they celebrate, terrible news will arrive. The Dajjal, the Antichrist, has appeared. A voice will cry out, "The Dajjal has taken over your families." The Mahdi will rush back with his army, only to discover it's true. The greatest trial in human history has begun. But that is where this story intersects with another, the descent of Jesus, son of Mary, and the final confrontation with the deceiver. That is a tale for another time. Today, belief in the Mahdi shapes geopolitics in ways Western analysts often fail to understand. Iranian leadership explicitly frames its resistance to Western hegemony within this eschatological framework. The rhetoric of preparing for the hidden imam's return is not merely symbolic. It influences policy, military strategy, and national identity. So what are we to make of all this? For believers, these are not mere myths, but living prophecies, signs to be watched for, preparations to be made. For skeptics like Allama Iqbal, they represent a dangerous distraction from the hard work of reform and progress. For historians, they are fascinating examples of how eschatological beliefs shape human behavior across millennia. But perhaps there's another perspective. These traditions, whether literal prophecy or archetypal narrative, speak to something profound in the human experience. They acknowledge that evil is real, that injustice is pervasive, that human efforts alone often seem insufficient. They also affirm an even deeper truth, that justice is not an accident of history and its inevitable destination, that oppression cannot be the final word, that guidance will come when darkness seems absolute. Whether one interprets this literally or metaphorically, the underlying message resonates. Hope is rational. Justice is coming. The arc of history bends toward righteousness. The concept of the Mahdi reminds us that we are part of a much longer story, one that began before we were born and will continue after we are gone. A story where tyrants fall, where truth emerges, where the oppressed are vindicated. In the end, whether the Mahdi comes as a single individual or whether each generation must embody his principles, justice, courage, wisdom, sacrifice, may be less important than what the belief itself accomplishes. It keeps alive the conviction that injustice is not permanent. It keeps alive the hope that the world can be healed. It keeps alive the faith that divine intervention in human affairs is possible. And perhaps that faith, that refusal to accept tyranny as the final state of things, is itself the beginning of transformation. The Mahdi is mentioned in numerous hadith collections across both Sunni and Shia Islam. Scholarly debate continues about the authenticity and interpretation of these traditions. What remains undisputed is this: for over 1,400 years, the concept has shaped Islamic thought, inspired movements, and sustained hope in the darkest of times. Whether prophecy or archetype, the message endures. Justice will prevail.